Thank you, Emily, and welcome everyone to our webinar, The Science of Leading and Managing with Resilience in Uncertain Conditions. I am so excited to be doing this with AceUp and with the Institute of Coaching, and want to welcome you from all around the world, from wherever you are. This is a very challenging and certainly unprecedented situation that we're all experiencing. And so it's really very special for us to have an opportunity to share some practices, some science, and some real life experience from senior executives and those that are on the front lines working with organizations that are doing their best to be resilient and to do well and thrive in these uncertain conditions. We're certainly excited here at the Institute of Coaching to be teaming up with AceUp. And I want those of you that are new to us here at the Institute of Coaching to join me in welcoming AceUp as one of our new platinum sponsors at the Institute. We're very excited to be partnering with them. I've been a guest on one of their webinars, and we're excited to have them be co-leading this webinar, and we've created a number of different programs together. And it's really part of the mission of the Institute of Coaching to be developing partnerships and sponsorships with like-minded coaching organizations and other organizations, corporate organizations that are really committed to two things. One, building a culture of coaching, developing leaders that are committed to coaching as part of their best practices in building their organizations, and also committed to the evidence-based research, the science that underpins effective coaching. And for those of you that are not familiar with the Institute of Coaching, we're based in Boston as an affiliate of McLean Hospital at Harvard Medical School. And we are a nonprofit research institute, an educational institute committed to developing, disseminating, and providing resources for the growing and I would say burgeoning profession of coaching on multiple domains: leadership coaching, positive psychology coaching, education coaching, health and wellness coaching. Our goal is to provide grants for research, to develop education programs, webinars, videos, master classes, and other resources that are there to support the coaches that are part of our membership and are looking for resources to really build the professional level of their practice with scientific underpinnings. So that is the reason for our existence and the reason that we are out looking to share these kinds of opportunities with the public and with folks that are interested in either becoming coaches or build coaching as part of the culture of their organization. So, and I hope you will look, if you're not familiar with us, at our website, theinstituteofcoaching.org, where you can get a lot more information and a free masterclass on resilience that we've created and curated just for this particular time, and a lot of other resources that hopefully you'll find helpful, whether you're a coach or a leader at this particularly difficult time for all of us. And with that, I want to introduce first AceUp, our platinum sponsor, and also our presenter today, Pratt Bennett. So let me just take a minute to share a little bit about AceUp, because AceUp is really an exciting organization. They're kind of at the leading edge of what's happening in the intersection between technology and science and coaching. And so it's really an honor for us at the Institute of Coaching to have them as one of our sponsors. AceUp is a relatively young company, was founded 4 years ago with the mission to help employees develop skills and confidence they need to succeed in their roles today and tomorrow, and probably most importantly, to thrive within organizations. AceUp does this by partnering with companies to deliver tech-enabled executive coaching solutions that maximize employees' engagement, increases retention, fosters performance through a culture of transformational learning. You can see that they're very much aligned with our commitment to building the evidence-based scientific underpinning as a foundation for executive and leadership coaching. And before I move on, I want to introduce Pratt, who's going to lead us in an incredible conversation with a panelist from leaders that are at the front lines of what we're all dealing with today. And I want to encourage you all to send in questions. We're going to take breaks all through the webinar so that we can have as much dialogue with Pratt and with the executives that we have on the line as possible. Pratt Bennett is an executive and leadership coach, a neuro leadership coach with over 25 years of experience helping leaders from over 95 countries and 40 industries to develop the motivation, organization, and communication skills they need to get to next level performance. Pratt is committed to leveraging brain science, his experience, and research in a variety of fields to help leaders identify their strategies to respond effectively to rapid change and disruption. Totally appropriate given the current situation. He's the VP of Learning and Development at AceUp, and he works with HR and business leaders all across the country and all across the globe with training programs and coaching to help develop leaders with competencies so that they will thrive in these uncertain times. And I know he's invited some very special guests to be with us today, so we're very excited to have Pratt, to be partnering with AceUp, and to have his guests, panelists with us. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us and turn it over to you, Pratt.
Thanks, Jeff. So first of all, welcome everybody. I'm deeply humbled by the fact that over 1,000 people are here and more keep coming in. And I want to be really respectful of your time and the fact that you're taking time out when you've got so much on your plate, and just offer you something as a way of framing this webinar. So as you know, this is a time of tremendous disruption and challenge and frustration. And there are a lot of people and businesses experiencing new challenges and pain and loss. And we're going to be acknowledging all of that today. But the most important thing today is, so we've brought a lot of really good research from the IOC and elsewhere. We've brought advice from coaches that have been working with leaders for decades. And we brought 3 amazing HR leaders that we're going to be featuring later on today. But I have to explain one thing at the outset. We are a coaching company. And as a coaching company, we do not believe that we have the answers to your problems. We believe that we have the tools and the resources and the expertise to help you leverage what you already know, to help you leverage what you already do, and help increase your people's capacity to do things that only you could come up with. So the way I think about it a lot of times is the Iceberg Model, where a lot of what you're doing, you're thinking about consciously. Well, that's the tip of the iceberg. And I love neuro leadership came up with a really great construct that the amount of cognition that we're consciously aware of is equal to the amount of money in your wallet or your purse. And the amount of cognitive activity, memory, and knowledge that you have that you're not consciously aware of is equal to the United States economy. And what we found as coaches is that when you get that one new idea, that one new piece of advice, that one new construct, it can spark something to bring something down from under the surface of the water, from that deep, deep mass of the iceberg, and bring it up to the level of your conscious awareness. So all that I am hoping today, all the research and the advice and the stories that we've got today, for me, the only purpose of it is to spark one new insight in you. And if something comes up and you're like, oh my God, I have a great idea, I totally welcome you to mute us for a bit and follow that idea. Really great researcher out of Northwestern, Roy Jung Beeman, Mark Jung Beeman, sorry, has found that when we have an insight, we have about 3 to 5 minutes to really capture it, or else we lose it. We lose its full value. So if an insight, and I'm hoping that a lot of you have insights on this call, if an insight occurs to you, seriously, mute us for a bit, write something down, see where it leads you, because the whole purpose of this webinar is to activate what you already know and maybe give you a new idea. So in the realm of a new idea, we're really excited to be partnering with the IOC. I highly recommend their Mastering Resilience Masterclass, which Jeff alluded to. We're bringing some of that research and others into today's webinar, just a taste of it. It's another good iceberg. And we're bringing 3 leaders that we work with at AceUp because I think they have really tremendous stories. So you're going to hear from Carolyn Martin from Huntington Ingalls about how they developed a new vehicle for the Navy, and they allotted 12 to 18 months for it, and we're told that they had to deliver it in 6, which the company never done. And they did it, and they delivered it on schedule and under budget. It's a really amazing story. You're going to be hearing from John McMahon at Freshly. Freshly delivers over 35 million healthy meals a year to people across the country. And you're going to hear about how Freshly is dealing with the surge in demand and triple shifts and how to keep everybody healthy and productive in a period of tremendous disruption. And you're going to be hearing from Samantha Sutton from Ginkgo Bioworks about how they've had to completely change their priorities from all these amazing bioengineering projects they've done pretty much to just COVID-related projects, and how they've changed all their workflow and procedures around that. It's a really good story of surviving and thriving in disruption. So you're going to be hearing about all of them in just a minute. And before we get started, I have a couple questions for you. And as Jeff said, I really recommend, I want to see the chat room on fire, because you have an opportunity here to not only interact with me and 2 other coaches and 3 amazing HR leaders, but over 1,000 people who are all thinking about how to build their and their people's resilience. This is an amazing time to crowdsource some ideas. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and see what you all can come up with. So the first thing is that we're going to be focusing on today the fact that resilience and adaptation, yes, some people are born with a better predisposition to it, but a lot of really good research shows it's really an adaptive trait. It's really a muscle, as Jeff was saying, that we exercise. It gets stronger with use. And there's a really interesting doctor who posted a graph on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if he made it, but I got it through him, Saljit Bilray, who posted this about the growth mindset in the time of COVID. And this is a great question. I love this question, because instead of saying, what are you going to do? It's, who do you want to be? It puts us at choice. And the research shows that when we're at choice, lower stress response increases creativity. So the first level that he talks about is the fear zone. And I'm going to be talking about this a lot, because let's face it, there are a lot of things triggering a fear response throughout the day and the week. It might be the latest from, Pressbury, update on from CDC or the administration. It might be something from friends and family. It might be something from a client, right? And it's very easy to get into the fear zone, and you're completely justified to be there, at least temporarily. The problem that I'm going to be talking about is when we allow ourselves to be triggered into fear and reactive, it activates the emotional center brain, the limbic system, which activates a thing that Daniel Goleman out of Harvard called the amygdala hijack, which basically the emotional brain takes over the cognitive brain, and it really prohibits your ability to think and prioritize and discriminate and plan, right? So we want to shift beyond that to something a little more proactive, where maybe we're in the learning zone. And I just had a great talk with the panelists at the beginning, sort of like, what are we learning? Like, what are we adapting? And the answer is so much every day. And if we can just shift from fear to learning, we're already in a much better active, proactive space. But even better, what if we could get into sort of the growth zone and sort of look at this and look at how we have so many choices here. There's so many things in the learning and the growth zone we're going to be talking about today that not only put us at choice, but they make us feel better. They lower our stress response. They lower the flow of stress chemicals like cortisol, adrenaline, that are very good in the short term and very damaging to health and welfare in the long term. They make us feel more purposeful. They make us feel more grateful. And all of that is not only better for your emotional and psychological well-being, it's also much better for your work performance and for your people's work performance. So I'm hoping that today you're going to hear some ideas that can help you and your people shift from fear to learning and hopefully to growth. And you're going to get these slides and be like, how can I get that picture? My advice, screen capture now, slide later. Okay, so first in the chat, I'm going to ask Jeff to manage the madness because we've got so many people here. I'd love some people to chime in on if there's one thing that you and your people really need today around this area of adaptation and pivoting and resilience, what is it? What would you love to get out of this webinar from coaches and leaders and research? And I'm going to pause there and give some time for people to weigh in. And Jeff is going to work his magic, scan all these responses and pull a few out for us to sort of think about.
I feel like a cash register taking in money. I'm laundering. I've been watching Ozark. What can I say?
Wow, this is a lot.
Yeah. How to better support coaches, motivation, resilience, practical tips. One concrete idea, an aha moment. I love that.
Love the aha moments.
What are the components of resilience? How can I help people get out of fear? Strategies for anxiety. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to keep those coming in.
Keep coming, yep.
And Jeff's job is going to be to capture them all, you know, and get back to everybody individually, Jeff. That's when you go.
No problem. That'll test my resilience muscle.
Okay, next, we wanted to, so for me, the qualitative is all in the chat, and I'd love people to just keep putting answers in there, right? But we also want to get a quantitative idea of like what really do you really need to grapple with today? So what are you most concerned about? And Sue is going to launch a poll in a minute that's going to allow us to capture. Now this poll is not going to capture all of your concerns. Okay, that's too long a list. What we really want to do is just, okay, here, of this list, what are the top ones for you? And here we go. So I'm going to leave this up for a minute because I want you to actually take a minute and actually look at the entire list before you choose, instead of feeling that you have to just quickly choose the first one that resonates. I'm actually going to revisit these myself. Okay, so what I'd like is for you to take about, you know, we'll leave about 30, 45 seconds here for people, and you might need to scroll down because there are a number of options here. But again, I know that there are so many, and if you had to choose your top one, what would it be? We're going to leave this open for a while. By the way, I want to congratulate everybody who's on the chat, because I see people already shifting into the learning zone, if not the growth zone. The way the chat things are framed is really learning and growth focused. So this is something you absolutely can do with your teams. Nice. Good. So we're going to leave this up for about 15 more seconds just to let everybody either finish chat or poll. Okay, and Sue, if you could close the poll, please. And then we're going to see what this amazing audience of people from around the world have come up with. Okay, so first of all, not surprising that there's a good distribution of answers. The top one, by at least 10%, is how are we going to rebuild when the pandemic is over? Which is such a, actually, really good growth question, a growth thing to focus on. Number two would be how to best demonstrate EQ and trust while remote. That's fantastic. It's like the first thing we're going to talk, first and third thing we're going to talk about. And then tied for third would be how to keep employees engaged while remote, which we'll talk about, and how to communicate it. Wow, this is perfect. Okay. Thank you for validating everything we're going to be producing today. So Sue, if we can close that now. Okay, great. Okay, so now I want to go into another kind of growth mindset question that I would love to see some people answer on the chat. So first of all, we're going to be going into the science of resilience. And very little, it's an enormous iceberg of research. And again, I applaud the IOC for what they've got under the Mastering Resilience masterclass. There's a lot of good resources there. I'm going to be sharing more here. You'll see references at the bottom. If you get the webinar, you'll see a full slide deck resources afterwards with links. Okay, so first of all, if we're talking about resilience, first of all, we need a working definition, and researchers actually have quite a number of different definitions because there have been so many different studies of so many different populations. But my favorite for today's purposes is from the American Psychological Association because it's so growth focused. So they define resilience as the process of adapting well. So here we go. The process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. Now, if you look at that, all of that is happening now. All of those are happening now, which means we are all experiencing opportunities to build resilience. All right, these are actually things that we could reframe, as difficult as they are, into growth opportunities that would allow us to build beyond the present moment. So in terms of what it is, we've got, actually, hold on, I'm going to save that for a minute. Resilience, as all of you know, in terms of your businesses, that resilience, for example, could be diversifying your supply chain. It could be making your work schedules more flexible, allowing people to work from home with kids, changing who your customers are in some cases, changing what your distribution system is. There's so many ways in which you are learning to be resilient. We'll talk more with our HR leaders later. But in terms of why your people need to know more about this, it's really that the more information we share about resilience, the more we celebrate resilience and promote it, the more we give people opportunities to see a reactive moment as a proactive moment, a stressor as something that could make them stronger, a setback as an opportunity to rethink how things are being done. And you're going to hear a lot of great stories about that. One of my favorite brain experts, John Medina, the author of Brain Rules, points out that if you look at our ancestral evolution, our species is the species that adapted as nomads, and that we evolved to be highly adaptive to changing circumstances throughout the year. So we have literally evolved for moments like this. We don't realize it, but we have literally evolved for moments like this to learn from them, to adapt to them, and to build new solutions and strategies. So, you know, all of our ancestors have sort of gone through very challenging moments to get us to the moment where we can respond constructively to this. And the more aware we are of how often, not just our ancestors, but how often we have had to adapt and we have had to be resilient in the face of adversity, the more prepared we are for this current moment. So a lot of people, you know, how do I do it? How do I build my people's resilience? Well, actually, I would reframe that question and see if I did this right. Okay. Actually, so two things. First of all, if you look at the graph in the lower right-hand corner here, this is one of my favorite insights from research around this. So Sonia Lyubomirsky, who is a researcher at UC Riverdale, has done a lot of global studies on resilience and happiness and sustainable gratitude, things like that. And one of the studies that she cites in her book, The How of Happiness, is a really surprising finding in resilience research, which is they looked at people who had been through truly traumatic events, genocide in Rwanda, bank robbery at which guns were fired, economic recessions. And they interviewed people who had been through that. And quite understandably, they found a number of people who had PTSD around those moments. They kept reliving them, and those were traumatizing events. But what was surprising was they found people who, on their own, had done a dramatic reframing of the event. And my favorite example around this is these people who'd been in a bank in London during a bank robbery. And some of the people said, you know, it was a normal day. I was doing my business. I was standing in line at the bank. All of a sudden, guns came out. Bullets were firing. I could have been killed. It was the worst day of my life. That was sort of what you would expect. But there was this other group that said, it was an ordinary day. I was minding my own business. I was in the bank. All of a sudden, guns came out. Bullets were flying. I could have been killed, but I wasn't. It was the most amazing day of my life. And none of those people were prompted, right? So they call this post-traumatic growth. And we have this idea of, wow, if people have been through genocide and near-death experiences and huge economic recessions and war could actually see it as an opportunity for them to reframe their priorities, you know, maybe we could do that here too. And she talks about, you know, the research she cites talks about that difference between surviving and thriving. So I really want us to be thinking about, wow, with a reframe, we could help our people to be more resilient. So my question, the next question for the chat is, okay, I very quickly gave you a little taste of research. Is there one thing that stands out? Is there one thing you want to hear more about? Because as far as I'm concerned, the rest of my content that I'm going to share with you is pretty flexible. You know, if something jumps out, I would rather talk to what a lot of people want than what I've prepared. So I'm going to leave it for a minute, let Jeff do his magic, and see if some patterns emerge in terms of what people are really paying attention to in that and what they want to hear more about. Oh, I love that question.
There are a lot of themes coming up around how to develop this post-traumatic growth mindset.
Fantastic.
And muscle and the tools.
And the idea. Yeah.
And your background with neuroscience may be very helpful for that also, because there's neurological,
Right. So, right. Absolutely. So the quick research that I will cite around this is research that the Neuro Leadership Institute has been really foundational in, which is this idea when Daniel Goleman talks about the limbic hijacking that I referenced. So when the brain is threatened and that amygdala fires off to protect you, you know, to get you to run, fight, flight, freeze, that's designed to protect you. But when you're in a job where you're sitting behind a desk all day and the threats are coming at you via email or Slack or whatever, it's a little bit harder because we've adapted to run away and adrenaline surges, and then it's supposed to calm when we get away from the danger. But if we're sitting at our computers or if we're in a factory all day and the danger keeps pinging us, it's harder to run away from it. So what the researchers associated with the Neuro Leadership Institute have found is that when we're threatened, the brain gets into an avoid mentality and it just shuts down a lot of information opportunity that is meant to protect us. But the problem is it's also blocking a lot of information. It's blocking a lot of options. It's blocking a lot of new ideas. Now, if instead we can reframe and see, wow, whoa, didn't see that coming. I wonder what we can do. How have other people react? We can get the brain into what's called an approach mindset. When the brain is in an approach mindset, it relaxes that limbic system alarm system, and it actually opens the brain up to more data, more analysis, and you can solve problems more quickly, creatively, and accurately. And one of the researchers that I love in this space is Teresa Amabile out of Harvard Business School, who did a multi-year study of multiple organizations gathering people's work journal entries. And what her research, looking at thousands and thousands of work journal entries that is really useful for us today, is when they interviewed these people's managers and said, you know, how productive is this person? They found that the most productive people were the people who on a daily basis were focusing more on progress than setbacks, more on what she calls small wins than big frustrations. And these people weren't, just rainbow and unicorn optimists. These were people who absolutely in their work diary entries, they understood the difficulties and the obstacles, but they kept the majority of their focus on these small wins. And those people solved more problems, came up with new solutions, made more progress because they were more solutions focused, more change focused, more adaptation focused. So that's one way in which we can get the brain to shift from avoid to approach. Okay, so we've got some really good things, and we've got so many intelligent people on the chat. So I'm loving that people are not only asking questions and saying what they want. I'm also seeing some people reflect some insight, and I'm hoping some of the many coaches through the IOC and AceUp are going to be offering their insights as well as we move through. Okay. So now I'm going to be offering insight from some coaches, including myself. I will say quickly, we ran a recent webinar where we had 7 coaches, and that was amazing, and Jeff was on that. And that was amazing, and we'll offer an opportunity for you to get that playback if you want more tips from coaches. We thought we'd balance coach and business leaders today in order to have a bigger variety of things for a bigger variety audience. Okay, so first, so what I'm going to be talking about is communication, and what research into leadership communication shows us about how you can really help your people be more adaptive and resilient. So first of all, in terms of the why, as I said, a lot of your people, for quite understandable reasons, are being activated throughout the day. You know, is my job safe? Is my team safe? Are my coworkers safe? Are we going to be able to get through this? Are we going to keep our clients? All those questions are constantly coming at them. And so that is triggering one of the brain's alarm system triggers, one of the 5 biggest triggers, which is certainty, uncertainty. And the more uncertainty people have, the more they get into that avoid mindset that shuts them down from being able to think clearly and organize and get through their work. So that's really the main reason is uncertainty is triggering the avoid mentality. Now, okay, so again, I talked about the limbic system. So this is sort of a very simple diagram of our 3-part triune brain. And the problem when uncertainty is dominating is that the base, sort of the emotion, the oldest part of the brain that we share with reptiles is really triggering to a level where we can't think. Our executive functions really can't operate very well, right? So we really want, if we want to get people out of this zone and up into this zone, we need to reduce that alarm system, that trigger of uncertainty. And there are a lot of communication strategies that research show really work. Okay, so what they need from you, and I'm going to be talking primarily about some very, let's see, there we go. Okay, I'm going to be talking about 4 things that you can, as leaders and coaches, do to really increase the certainty, reduce uncertainty, increase confidence, reduce stress, increase flexibility of mind, and reduce panic. So the first is connection. Carol Kaufman has done some really good research on this too, that we thrive on social connection. We thrive on being more connected. I had a great call with my team this morning where 20 people from my team were on a Zoom call, and that gallery view was so comforting for me because here I was, this team I haven't been able to be with physically for many weeks, they're in my house. And there's a lot of good research showing that one of the problems of working remotely and working from home is you get what's called a distance bias, that the people who are remote versus on site feel less connected, they feel less heard, they feel less involved. So anything that leaders can do to be reaching out and connecting, both as groups and on an individual level, really boosts people's approach mentality. Next, consistency. So is there a way that you can create some stability in the company or your division or your team's communication? For example, hey, I know everything is crazy, but every Monday at noon, you're going to be getting an update from me. I know everything's out of whack, but every Thursday at 4, I'm going to have a one-on-one with you, and it's an agendaless check-in, and you just tell me whatever is coming. That consistency that predictability is really central to reducing people's stress response and increasing their approach, their openness response. Next, there's transparency. And I get a lot of pushbacks from the leaders that I work with. They're like, yeah, but number one, we don't know everything yet. And number two, that's bad news. People don't want to hear that. Actually, the research shows exactly the opposite. The research shows that people trust leaders more who share what they don't know as well as what they do know, what they haven't figured out as well as what they have, and the bad news as well as the good. They find these leaders more credible. And what's really encouraging to me is that the WHO, the World Health Organization, which is battling a lot of fake news about pandemics, since they started noticing this with SARS and H1N1, they're like, how can we get information out to people in a way that they really trust? And they found that people trusted their companies as brokers of information more than any other organization. So your leaders, your company, the WHO is actually partnering with hundreds of companies to share information from the WHO because they think if it comes through the company, people will believe it more. So you have this amazing opportunity to be transparent with your people, to be sharing information in a connected, consistent fashion that can dramatically reduce their sense of unpredictability of not knowing. And finally, and I love this research around purpose. So I had a great talk with John and his team at Freshly about sort of why they were doing it. And, you know, when they're talking about getting food to people who are in need or locked in and, you know, they can't go out, they don't feel safe going out, that really elevates your sense of why you're doing what you're doing. When I talk to Carolyn's people at Huntington Ingalls about why some of them are still going into the facility to build this vehicle, you know, and they're trying to practice social distancing, they're really clear on why the Navy needs this vehicle and how many people it's going to protect. Samantha's people at Ginkgo are really clear that it's like an all hands on deck for COVID-related initiatives. And they're not conflicted about why they are coming to work and other people why they're not physically needed in the facility, right? That's just really clear messaging. And there's very good research that the more we connect people to a higher purpose, the more people understand why their sacrifice or their participation is necessary, why it's a really good thing. So I'm going to see if I can go into my question here. Yeah. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, so what I want to ask everybody before moving on to the next tip is, how could you take one of these 4 strategies and use it with your people in the next week? I say one because it's too much to think about 4, right? And Teresa Mabile and other people's research has shown actually the easiest step is the best step to take first. Get some early wins under your belt in the communication realm. So just quickly, I want to hear from people in the chat. I'm going to ask Jeff to sort of look for patterns. What's one of these strategies that you maybe can use more or you can start using with your people to reduce that avoid mentality and increase the approach mindset that is more resilient and adaptive? I'm going to pause, stop talking, let people think and listen to each other.
What I'm seeing come through really loud and clear, Pratt, is connection with purpose. Not just connection just for the sake of connecting.
Oh, I love that combination. Connection with purpose. I kind of want to sit with that for a minute.
And then transparency with purpose. I think that one thing that seems to be coming through from a lot of folks is that whether you're being, you know, the value of transparency, the value of authenticity, the value of connection is all elevated if there's an underlying purpose that's clear.
Wow, this is so good. And this aligns so well with the research.
Absolutely.
I know Daniel Pink in his book Drive, where he's gathering 30 years of motivational research. One of the main motivational triggers that his research shows activates people at work is purpose, meaningfulness.
Right.
Right? So that's so great. Anything else, Jeff, before I move on?
I think that's the primary driver of what people are really resonating with.
Right. Great. And again, I'm going to invite any coaches in there. If you want to share ideas about how to connect people with purpose, that would be the right space to do it. I'd love that.
And as a coach, I'll toss in one thing
Please.
that I think is valuable, which is when we talk about purpose, I love the fact that you said meaning, because sometimes as coaches, we get very wrapped around the word goals. And it can become very goal focused, which is valuable, but it's a different thing from creating meaning. And sometimes you actually want to create meaning and contact and consistency and connection without, maybe that's the only goal, right? So
I really like that.
Yeah, there's a distinction between goal and purpose, I guess.
I love that. And sometimes goal, especially in a coaching position, goal can be self-focused.
Right.
And I think so much meaning and purpose can be other-focused. And again, the research shows that when we shift from focus on self to focus on self-serving others, stress response goes down, fear thinking goes down, learning and growth thinking increases. Beautiful. Thank you, Jeff. Okay. So the next advice I want to offer is from a wonderful coach at AceUp who I really rely on for emotional intelligence insight. So Amy Rebecca has been doing leadership development coaching for quite a long time. She specializes in communication around conflict and relationship management. And she does a lot of work. I love her work with the ladders of inference about really learning how what you're hearing and what else someone else is thinking are very often two very different things, and how we need to learn to sort of bring those ladders and those reference points together. And so I've asked Amy Rebecca to sort of come up with, if she had to summarize a leadership strategy that she thinks is going to really build resilience. And she really talks about this idea of feeling first in order to think better. And she and I talk about how we get a lot of pushback from leaders on validating emotion. And one of the sort of research findings that I like to share with leaders that Oliver Sacks first made me aware of, and then I found other research for, was that people who have brain injuries that don't allow them to access, they can think perfectly clearly, but they can't access their emotions easily, those people have incredible difficulty making decisions. When we can't weigh something with our emotions, everything looks the same. All data looks the same to the brain. So emotions are incredibly important for decision making. But I have heard a lot of my clients, the leaders I work with, and the coaches that I work with are telling me, a lot of people are getting emotions that are paralyzing them, emotions that are, again, getting them in that avoid mentality, emotions that are overwhelming them. And so what Amy Rebecca talks about is that if you want to get past the emotions, one of the worst things that you can do is to suppress them, to deny that they're happening, to pretend they aren't happening. So the reason that we all need this is if leaders aren't sharing their emotions, if leaders aren't making space for their emotions, then we are sending a signal to our people, you can't share either, right? This organization, this team, we don't talk about emotions. We just get down to business. Now, again, that's a fallacy, and there's enormous amounts of research backing this up. But to have that model where there's no space for emotions, for validating emotions, especially negative ones, a negative emotion is just going to throw us off track. No, actually, denying the negative emotion will throw you off track, because by denying it, you actually intensify its emotional trace in the brain. So in terms of how we can get through this, so your people need you to give them space to have emotions that aren't productive, right? To just acknowledge emotions that are problematic. And what the research, and Amy Rebecca has opened a lot of stuff for me on this, what the research shows is that actually if we want to move past problematic direct emotions, it's actually much more productive to sit with them for a moment and to do a really good affective technique that was first discovered by James Gross out of Stanford. Susan David has done a lot of work with this in emotional agility, which is naming the emotion. Like I like to call this one, name it to tame it. If you can name the emotion that's coming up, that actually moves you from that emotional brain to the cognitive, because labeling is a cognitive task. So if you can label and measure it, that's even better. Like, oh God, I'm experiencing anxiety. How bad is it on 1 to 10? I don't know. Like I just got an email from my boss. It's like a 9. When you name it and label it, you actually bring the prefrontal cortex back online to a certain extent, maybe not 100%. So there's a really good construct for this in terms of something that you can use. And this comes from Yale's Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I really like this. Draws on a lot of previous research, but with a really catchy acronym that's easier for me to remember. And it's called RULER. I'm just going to walk you through it. And again, feel free to screen capture this. I found it extremely useful. I was aware of measuring and labeling, but I didn't think about some of these other steps. So the first thing is, okay, just recognize it. So I actually want us to do this for a minute. I'd like everybody just to sit for a second, just be like, okay, what is one emotion I am experiencing today or this week? For me, definitely a lot of uncertainty. Okay, we've named it. Next, okay, so what could a cause and consequence of that emotion be? You could just do one. Like if I let this emotion just go on without being addressed, what is that anxiety going to do for me? Oh, and the people citing Mark Brackett, yes, you're exactly right. Excellent research. He is a Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. You're going to see my reference at the bottom in a minute. Okay, next. Label it. Okay, so recognizing, I guess, isn't the labeling. Sorry, Mark. Just, yes, I'm having an emotion. Okay, that could throw me. I'm going to call it anxiety, for example. Again, labeling, bringing up the prefrontal cortex. Next, express it. I love this. Like actually give yourself a chance to give yourself a chance to let that happen in a pillow, in a sigh, whatever it might be. And finally, regulate it, which basically means, okay, all right, I'm going to do something about that. And I'm going to take an action that allows me to do something. And again, that should have come up. I'm sorry, I thought I had it. Oh, yeah, I'll put this research in later. It's from Mark Brackett at Yale's Center for Emotional Intelligence. So the question I would ask everybody here from Amy Rebecca's tip, and we're going to take a few seconds. How could you make validating your emotions easier, or rulering your emotions easier and more frequent? What is one thing you could do on a daily basis, not only for your team, because if you're not doing it, it's really hard for your team to believe in it. What is one thing you can do for yourself and maybe share with your team that would allow you to maybe just do a couple of these ruler actions? And Jeff, take a look, and if you see any patterns before I go to the next tip, I would love to hear what you're seeing.
Modeling, journaling, meditating. My favorite one is breathing.
Oh my God, such good research on breathing.
Right, take a breath. Exercise.
That's good. That's good. Jim Lapata is my favorite guy. He's always telling me, have you been breathing? I'm like, oh, right. That really takes it down a notch. I always hold tension in my upper chest. And when I sort of fill the stomach more, it really it makes me more self-aware.
Our newest research dose just coming out, I think next week, is a research on how to breathe. It studies the way to get the most impact in terms of like pranayama breathing.
So if people
look
on
for
this
that.
webinar want to get that, Jeff, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Most likely through the Institute of Coaching website. It'll be up. It's being curated by Margaret Moore right as we speak. So I'm not sure exactly what day.
Okay.
But it should be there.
So keep posted, people. Great. So because I want to get to the panelists, I'm going to go to our last tip. So this is from Otis McGregor, another amazing coach. So Otis had, I love Otis as a strategy and crisis management coach because Otis had 25 years as a Green Beret in Special Forces, doing missions around the globe with allies and sometimes unpredictable resources. And what Otis talks about is the need to expect the unexpected. To be really proactive about things coming up that you haven't planned for. Now, the reason that your people need this is there's pretty much nothing your company has planned that is a guarantee at this point. A lot of things are changing, needing to change. We're adapting to change. So I don't think I need to sell you on that. What they need from you is they need a system where you are taking them through some really simple steps of contingency planning, which is, and I love what Otis talks about is, okay, what is the most probable to happen right now? Okay, great. What can you plan for that? Great. What's a plan B or C in case the probable doesn't happen? And then what Otis talks about is, okay, and what's the worst thing that you can happen? What worst thing that can happen? Sorry. And so his teams will look at both the most probable and the worst case. And then they will what if it. Okay, here's the probable. Well, what if this supplier doesn't come through? What if this worker gets sick? What if this delivery doesn't work? In the worst case, okay, so what if that business shuts down? What if that supply route isn't accessible, right? And so again, what he is talking about is supported by a lot of research on contingency thinking. Elliot Berkman out of NYU, Julie Norum out of Wellesley has done really good research. One thing I want to share from Julie Norum's research that I love is she talks about people who are defensively pessimistic and how that can actually be really useful. And she says, when people are being defensively pessimistic, they set low expectations. But then they take the next step, which is to think through in concrete and vivid ways what exactly might go wrong. And what we've seen in the research is if they do this in a specific, vivid way, it helps them plan to avoid the disaster. They end up performing better than if they didn't use the strategy. It helps them direct their anxiety toward productive activity. So even people who are more in that avoid state, if they're taking that defensively pessimistic thing, they are what-ifing all the time, those can be really valuable members of your team. So the steps that Otis recommends, the first step, just go with your gut. After that, prepare for what's next, plan for the probable, game out the worst case. Now, Otis is talking about doing this sequentially, like in this order. But if you automatically do the last one, then maybe look at the beginning, the first steps. And if you automatically do the first steps, maybe look at one lower on the list. So what I'm going to ask you right now, in terms of a last question before we go to the panelist, what plan can you make this week for what's most likely to happen? And or what can you plan around? Like, get yourself in a learning growth mindset right now. Like, what do you want to plan around? And then we're going to shift to our panelists. Great question. Defensive pessimism and positive psychology, they're both real. They're both true. And again, Jeff, as you see people coming in, let me know the patterns you see. Oops, sorry. That's what's next. There we go. So what do you see people thinking about in the planning area, Jeff?
I think it's clear that it's difficult right now for us to even think about planning. So one of the words that came through a few times that I thought was really helpful is scanning for the new normal, you know, in the sense of being comfortable with not knowing.
Love it, because scanning is an ancestral strategy. As our ancestors were walking across the savannah, they were constantly scanning for opportunity and threat. That's actually really adaptively smart. Great. Anything else you're seeing? Okay, while those are coming in, I'm going to shift to our panelists. I'm going to start with Carolyn Martin. And Carolyn Martin, who is head of HR at Huntington Ingalls Unmanned Vehicles Division. I've been working with them for a while, and I think it's safe to say the entire time that I've been working with them, they have gone from one challenge to the next, and it's been amazing to watch them respond. So first of all, Carolyn, and maybe Sue, if you can make sure Carolyn's video is on and featured so that we can see Carolyn and all of her awesomeness. And we got Carolyn. I can't tell, I've got too many people here. There we go, I see Carolyn. All right, hold on, let's see if I can, here we go. Okay, Carolyn, hello.
Hello.
So you've heard what we were talking about, and you've heard us talk about the consistency and the communication behaviors, which I saw you guys do a lot around some of the major changes that were happening. Acknowledging emotions, I certainly saw that happening at the leadership level on a regular basis. And also then the contingency planning, which you guys have had to do nonstop. Which one or combination resonates most with, and maybe you should really talk about the new vehicle challenge, which was really kind of a marathon sprint for your company?
Sure. I think if I think about all the challenges that we've been through, first, you know, tremendous growth, which as the market leader in the autonomous underwater vehicle space, which is a great place to be, but also creates some people challenges, as well as the R300 vehicle, which I'll talk about, and then applying some of the concepts that helped us to be successful with those initial challenges, addressing turnover, delivering a very sophisticated vehicle within 6 months, really have created a framework that we've been able to replicate to help us successfully navigate COVID, and now a transition as we were just welcomed into the Huntington Ingalls organization, and we're facing a lot of changes related to that integration. And what I would say is the keys to that are some of what you've already touched upon today. I think working with leaders and whether it's people in leadership roles, or I know for myself in human resources, I think oftentimes we feel like we have to have all the answers. And in all of these challenges that we had to deal with, turnover and delivering a vehicle within a very compressed time frame, certainly COVID for all of us, it allowed us to acknowledge that as leaders, we didn't have all the answers. And that we really had to open the conversation up to our teams. And so again, you know, we started with trying to get an understanding of the turnover, and, you know, going out there and meeting with people and understanding what were the pain points, what can we do to address some of your concerns. We've been doing the same thing with COVID. We don't have all the answers. I think that's one where we can all acknowledge it's such a unique situation that none of us have had to deal with before. Maybe it's easier for leaders to kind of recognize that they may not know exactly how to handle it. So we have been out since day one saying, you know, here's what we're thinking, here's our plan, what do you think, poke holes in it, what's working for you, what's not, you know, for our people that are working from home, you know, again, how's the technology, how can we help improve it? For the people that have to be here on our production floor, you know, we made changes to support social distancing, but, you know, some of it was working, some people still had concerns. So really engaging our team throughout the entire process. And I think that's really helped to create the, you know, connection with our teams and the transparency that you spoke of earlier, Pratt. So for all 4 of those challenges, which created, difficult situation, a lot of uncertainty for people. Engaging with the team as much as we can, and again, now primarily virtually, but as often as we can to get input, really sends the message that we as leaders cannot come up with the best solutions on our own. We need our team's input and advice and help, and they feel that they're part of the solution, and they feel like the company cares about them.
Okay, so there's so many things I love about what you're saying, and I know you and we've been working a lot with our teams on growth mindset, right? Like, what can we learn from this? How can we get better at this? So when you came on, the first issue you were dealing with was turnover, which has been reduced like really dramatically, right? And if I remember correctly, a lot of that came from a really painful source of conversations, which were exit interviews, right? So can you connect what you were doing in exit interviews, which are people who are on their way out, to how the leadership team has been communicating with people who are staying at the company through COVID?
Well, I mean, the problem with the exit interviews was it was too late to take action. I mean, we could certainly apply that information going forward, but by being out there and engaging with people on a more regular basis, we have a pulse of where people are. I think, from the chat, a few people had mentioned kind of just checking in with your people and understanding, how are you doing today? Where we feel like we have a much better sense of if we do have employees that are at risk, because we do feel like we're interacting with them and engaging them at a different level. And we feel like we have a really good understanding of how they're all responding to the COVID situation. So it's really just that connection and awareness that has really helped us turn the culture around.
And you've also, this shift to much more remote has happened at a time when your combination with Huntington Ingalls has now taken you from maybe 2 sites to 5 sites. Is that right?
Yes.
So I imagine now the things that are working for people at your Pocasset site are actually really helping you be as connected with the people who normally would be remote. So it may be everybody's getting more equal communication than they would have at another time. Is that right?
I think that's right, because we historically had 2 smaller offices outside of our primary corporate location and production facility. And there was always the sense that, the people in Pocasset were in the room and the others were participating by phone, and that creates a different dynamic. Now we're all participating virtually. So it is kind of an equalizer from that perspective. And it has really forced us to, look at how to make the best use of technology and create those connections. And I think, we can all relate to that, when we get back to normal, whenever that is, having tested out some of this and done a lot of virtual engagement activities, we're doing meditation sessions and trivia games and really trying to do some fun stuff with our team to lighten some of this up a bit. We'll continue to utilize those tools.
So if right now I said, okay, what is one insight about effective communication that you want to keep using after all of this has died down, and after the majority of people can come back physically and work on site, what do you want to keep doing that you discovered as a result of this disruption? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's okay. It sounds so simple, but taking the time to slow down, and because we're all moving so quickly and we feel like we have to have all the answers again, taking the time to slow down and talk to your people, ask questions, listen to what they have to say, and acknowledge that oftentimes they can come up with a better solution than the senior management team sitting in a room together. The power of how your people can help you solve the problems has really been
I love that.
Been powerful for us.
I love that. And I know, having worked with a lot of your leaders, I know that they've actually been really authentically getting ideas from their teams, which is just, from the research that I do and the work that I do, that is a huge productivity and engagement booster. So beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So people, I'm going to ask Jeff to keep an eye on this, and Carolyn, you can take a look at the chat. If people have a question for Carolyn, I would love you to put it in the chat. And when I've gone through the other two panelists, we're going to come back and give Carolyn and John and Samantha a chance to answer some questions. Okay, so next, I would love to call on John McMahon. So John McMahon is head of people and HR at Freshly. And as I was saying, they've gone through an incredible amount of disruption through, well, actually, I'm going to ask John, if you, and let's make sure Sue or John, make sure John is unmuted so we can get all of his wisdom here. Great. John, this is a challenging question, but if you had to name the #1 unexpected disruption in all of the last few months, what would you say it was, and how has Freshly responded to it?
Well, thanks for having me today, Pratt. I think, it's been a unique challenge for us at Freshly because we're a new company, relatively so. We're about 5 years old, and we're operating in, 4 different states. And so keeping that continuity going with the challenges we've had in the COVID world has been our biggest challenge. So we have a little bit of a dichotomy because we have an office environment in New York City, which is our headquarters. There's 170 people there. So everybody there is working from home in one place or another. We then have another 1,400 people who work and have continued to work in the plants. So as an example, in Maryland, we have 850 people. So our biggest challenge has been to make them feel that we have provided them with the safest place possible to work. So the way we did that was we felt, let's not wait to see what everybody else is doing, but let's take the guidelines given by the CDC and now go very aggressively with our own protocols inside. So things like we started with temperature taking almost immediately. We started with asking a series of questions to make sure that if you were sick or you had anybody who was sick, we were going to ask you not to come home. We instituted additional sick time. So right off the bat, we gave the people an additional 5 days paid sick time so they wouldn't come to work sick. And finally, we said, okay, if you are COVID positive, we'll give you 14 paid days to get well before you come back. So all of those things, I think, were really critical for getting people to have that level of trust that we're looking for, with the combination of trust and ownership. So we talked a lot about what we did as a company, but we were very clear that there's mutual accountability here to make this a safe place. And therefore, you need to do the right things. You need to socially distance appropriately. You need to, if you are sick, please don't come to work, et cetera, et cetera. So that built up a sense of trust. The other thing I just say quickly is that we took a very purposeful approach on communication too, which was to make sure that we are really being transparent about everything. And there's an old adage that I've gone along with for many years, which is treat people like adults and they act like adults. Mm-hmm. They have the right to be given information that's straightforward and meaningful, and they can then make informed decisions for themselves and their families. So when somebody inevitably, as they did, we had our first case a couple of weeks ago, confirmed case, we immediately called team huddles together, small team huddles, because we didn't want to do town halls anymore, and informed them that, yes, in fact, somebody had tested positive in this department. We're continuing to do things we're doing. We'd ask you to continue to work. The resilience side of all that is that, yes, we had a little bit of an increase in call-outs and things like that, but that plant continues to run 24/7. Wow. We're shipping out 700,000 meals a week. And, the resilience that those folks have shown and the commitment has been nothing short of extraordinary.
Okay, so great. That's what I want to ask you about. So the resilience, people, collectively doing shifts 24/7, shipping 700,000 meals. I mean, there's got to be a threshold where people just get exhausted, right? Where people burn out. So is there a space for people to raise their hand and to say, I need 24 hours, or I'm not sure I can keep going at this pace? How do you make space for the uncomfortable communication that is coming from people and not just from leaders?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And what we've tried to do, and we're not perfect by any means. I'm sure some things have failed, but what we try to do is give people the opportunity. So with the additional 5 paid sick days, we're not asking to bring us a doctor's note. So there's your opportunity. You want to take a mental health day, there it is, and it's paid. We're asking people to, if you don't feel comfortable coming into the plant for whatever reason, you have the opportunity to stay home, and we're not going to, take your job away from you. We respect your decision that you want to make as a person and individual. So that's what we've tried to do. Giving downtime, look, food processing in a plant is very tough. It's hard work, and these folks, God love them, they do a great job at it, but some of them do burn out. And we do have a number of people who we call them no call, no show. Mm-hmm. They're there on Monday. You thought they're coming on Tuesday, never to be heard again from. And there are a high number of those in a normal environment. Now it's been exacerbated by this situation.
Okay. So again, so all your leaders have to be more resilient when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm going to ask people who have a question for John to put it in the chat. Jeff will capture that, and we're going to be coming back to him because I want to make time now for Samantha Sutton. So if we can make sure Samantha's unmuted. So Samantha, Ginkgo Bioworks researches so many different types of bioengineering, for so many different issues, for so many different possibilities. How did the company make the decision to scale down so much of what you're doing so that only the COVID-related projects were still, or those people were still going physically into work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So part of that was mandated by the state of Massachusetts. We're in Boston, and so part of it was they wanted to close down all businesses that didn't fall into certain categories, right? And so part of that was statewide. But that being said, Pratt, I really resonated with the piece that you were saying about purpose and mission. We're a very mission-driven company. Okay, so our goal is to revolutionize biotechnology by being able to engineer organisms that perform useful functions for humans. Okay. And so we, one of our big motivators at work is that people are doing things that are really making a difference in the future of humanity. And so, with everyone's life being affected by COVID, it was very clear that if we wanted to have a big impact right here and now in the world, working on COVID diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines was a huge opportunity. And we actually were pretty uniquely suited with our, we call it a foundry. It's a way to engineer biology to actually take very quick action on this. And so when that became clear, I think there was a shift in our consciousness of our company. This was a chance to do something really impactful here and now in the world. And I think I think a lot of this came down to change management. I know everyone on this call on this webinar is dealing with change and how do we manage change for the better, not change for the destructive, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I think about change management, I think of it in terms of, are we going to go in the direction of hope or despair? Right, I see those as kind of like the two countervailing forces, where despair is fear amplified with imagination, and hope is faith or trust and amplified with imagination. Right, and I love, Pratt, how for tip number 1 you said connection, consistency, transparency, and purpose. I think those 4 are what build the faith and the trust.
Okay, so let's drill into that for a minute. I love it. So you've got a bunch of people who are, they get that the state mandated, but you must have some people who are like, but what about me? Like, does that mean my project is being shut down for good? Like, how do you deal with the people who can't go in, who can't work on it, and their uncertainty? And even though these are super smart people, hey, fear triggers fear. And how do you help them get out of that space and know that even though they can't go into work now, they're, like Ginkgo is saving a place for them afterwards?
Exactly. And that's that moment where they can tip either to despair or to hope, right? Because they had these projects that they loved that were going to change the world in their own way, right? And all of a sudden they're being told, stop, put it on ice, and now we're going to pivot to COVID. But the person's like, I'm a yeast biologist. I know nothing about viruses. Like, I can recite the genome of Baker's yeast, but I viruses, what's that? So we're actually implementing very good retraining programs. So actually, we've been a part of the hope piece is having people see this is actually a unique opportunity for them to actually gain a new skill set that will actually make them more valuable on the Boston biotech scene. So we're offering Python programming, which is a computer programming that we need to use for some of the COVID work we're doing. We are offering training in mammalian cell biology, which most people have not had at Ginkgo before, right? So we're actually doing some cross training
for them to retool, for them to adapt.
It's now something that they can add to their resume, right? And again, this is pure prefrontal cortex stuff where it's like, wow, cool, my resume is going to look better as a result of this. What an opportunity I wouldn't have had before. Yeah, I loved my old project, but hey, this is pretty cool what I can now be trained to do.
I love the way you just framed that, because you're absolutely right. Of course, if you're like, hey, here's a training opportunity, absolutely, you're bringing people back online. Like, hey, cool, I like that. Good for. Fantastic. So I'm going to ask people, anybody who has a question for Samantha, to put that in the chat. I'm going to go, Jeff, can you pick, of the many, can you pick a question for Carolyn? Hey, your job, not mine.
Well, I can pick a question that I think is really powerful that Monique shared.
Great.
But I think it could really be for all of them. It came up after Carolyn, but it could be for all folks focused on HR. This is something that I think everyone's grappling with in that space, which is, how are you engaging with your staff around the more holistic dynamic that everybody is having to deal with? Family, children, homeschooling, work-life balance. You know, I mean, how are you engaging? I love this word she used, holistically, with your employees at this time.
Carolyn? Just make sure, yeah, that's an easy one.
Another one of those on the spot kind of questions.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, again, we have, as John mentioned, trying to deal with each situation individually. So, everybody has different needs, different family needs. So, I hate to go back to the engaging and communicating, and I think, it's easier for us to do as our unmanned team is about 300 people versus, some larger organizations. But just understanding what your people need and trying to deliver on that as well as you can. And so it doesn't have to just be something related to an HR policy. We just transitioned health benefits in the middle of a pandemic. Talk about another challenge. And working with people who, had to seek care while we were transitioning. And so it really is a kind of a person by person and trying to be as responsive to their needs as you can. I mentioned, some of the virtual engagement activities, which are a little bit lighter, but, just recognizing that people deal with these types of situations in many different ways. And so providing meditation for those who are feeling stressed. I don't know any of us who aren't. Providing some trivia, we're doing, submit pictures from your, best work from home beard or office buddy. People are sending, posting pictures on our intranet of them with their pets and their children. And so,
that's very big right now.
Yeah. Again, not a unique idea, but again, just recognizing that everyone deals with these things in their own way and trying to provide many ways for people to connect. And then when we have individuals that have, more specific needs, doing our best to be as flexible as possible in meeting those needs.
Great. Wow. Okay. Again, I'm so glad I'm not head of HR, because the diversity of problems you guys handle is truly awe-inspiring. So thank you for that. Jeff, can you pick a question for John?
Well, the question one of the themes that keeps coming up, I think John would be ideal to respond to it, which is, how do we work with resistance to change?
Yeah. Well, as somebody said before, I think about, change, that is the one constant in our lives, right? Let's face it. And I always tell people this: look, you have two choices about change. You can either resist it and it'll roll over you because it's bigger and badder than any one of us, right? Or you can choose to embrace it, and therefore you get to shape the change. So that's really been the approach that I've always taken with change. And when I try to get people to understand, resist it, you lose, and you get no option you get no availability to influence what it looks like once it's rolled over you, or embrace it and try and shape it. So we've really taken a lot of time to work with our supervisor in particular on the plant, because they're the people that are on the front line day in and day out, you know, with you know, more people probably than they should have to manage. The pressures of getting these meals not only sourced, cooked, packaged, shipped out the door every day, you know, so we've asked them to really try and step up and understand that everybody's going through a lot of change. We've given them some skills to do that. We've given them some training. We do one-on-one, you know, coaching. We do group coaching sessions with them throughout this process about, look, here's something that you're going to deal with. And by the way, there are probably 6 distinct languages that are spoken in these plants. So add that to these people's challenge, in addition to trying to get things done, is the language barrier. And so the level of trust that comes out of this, in order to make this even have a chance to work, is got to be huge. So they're in the midst of change. They have to build that trust, not only by what you say, but how you act and how you treat people day in and day out. Now, we tell them all the time, a little thank you. I appreciate that. That translates in, you know, beyond many languages. So that's what we've been doing, is really working through the supervisor, because they're the people who are frontline. And
I love the way you said, you know, resist it and have it roll over you and have no one, that again, resist it, like you're shutting it out, right? It's that avoid mentality, and, you know, respond to it, and you get to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Right? That's just, thank you. That's such a great construct. It sounds simple, but it actually allows you to tackle quite a big number of issues that we see people being resistant to everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And whoops, sorry, that was premature. Okay, Jeff, one for Samantha. I saw something came up.
I mean, the question that I think is again, I hate to put Samantha on the spot, but the question that seems to be really resonating is, you know, in this conversation around resilience, we want to move on to something positive and think about the future, but how do you know when to address the sense of loss and sadness and despair, and when to move on to something more positive? When is the right moment? How do you address that dichotomy?
I think you need to start there, actually. So I think it gets back to Pratt's tip number 2, right, about the ruler technique, where it's like, you need to acknowledge what's there first, right? So if someone is not wanting to change, right, you need to identify why not, what's going on, what are they afraid of, like what are they worried is going to happen to them, to their future, to their career, to their authority, right? And you need to spend some time there really understanding. And once you understand, I like the saying, you know, criticism is born of ignorance. So once you understand why the person feels the way they do, then you're at a spot to put on your problem solving cap and try to help them move forward. And so actually all of my meetings that I run, I start with everyone in the room giving either a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a thumb to the side based on how they're feeling at a given day, right? And we don't move forward until we've dealt with the sides and the downs to understand like what's in their space that might stop them from being able to constructively contribute to our meeting. And then we move forward. So I do think you can't move forward until you stop and evaluate where that person is at, and then you move forward together as opposed to trying to pull them forward with you.
Okay, so I am looking at the chat and I am seeing a lot of questions. So I'm going to propose something, because we need to wind down a little, make room for closing remarks, etc. That feel free to keep the questions coming in, and we're going to work with the IOC to find some patterns. And again, I'm going to rely on Jeff for this, to find some patterns, and then get John and Samantha and Carolyn to help us think through some questions that haven't been answered on this. And because we've got so much wisdom in this virtual room that I'm so excited about. So I want to, first of all, before I transition back to Jeff, I want to thank everybody for coming, not just for you, not just for you, but for your people, because that's really, they are the ones who need you the most. They need you to be resilient in order to help them be resilient. They need to see that trust and communication, that shift from despair to hope. that sense of connection. So I am hoping everybody got one new idea from the tips or the panelists today. We'll be sharing, Jeff, how will people get the webinar replay of this?
This is being recorded and it should be available within 24 hours. I don't want to make a hard and fast on that, but within a day or two at the most, it should be on the Institute of Coaching website, instituteofcoaching.org.
Okay. So I'm gonna just give our panelists one last chance to be on the spot and offer a final sentence or two of battle won wisdom. And I'll start with Samantha. You know, if you have one more tidbit to share with people that you think could help them out, what would you say?
Communicate early, communicate often. There's no such thing in this world as over communication.
Beautiful. John?
I would build on that and just say, you know, practice the dying art of listening, right? Most of us were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally.
Beautiful. And Carolyn?
Yeah, they stole mine. No, I mean, really, it sounds so simple, but it's really just keep talking to your people, just keep asking questions, and the most important is, and then listen. And you may not be able to solve all the problems, but you know, they appreciate the opportunity to even be listened to. So, and you can also get a lot of, you know, good ideas and solutions. So.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories and your experiences and your struggle. I think people really, judging by the hundreds of people that are still on the call, they're hanging on your every word. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass this back to you, Jeff.
Wow. So I know I am like filled to the brim. And it's a very, very positive, you know, sudsy. I was going to say beer, but I won't say that now. Anyway, just from the bottom of the heart of the Institute of Coaching, I want to thank Pratt for putting this together on very short notice, and really appreciative to all 3 of your expert panelists. I mean, it was really, talk about deep wisdom, incredibly wonderful opportunity for us all to share and learn, to build that muscle of resilience. You know, as I was listening to all of you, I kept thinking to myself, you know, in the midst of this crisis, these moments are an incredible blessing, because it is unique to be able to bring together AceUp and 3 amazing companies and 3 amazing human resource executives to talk about how we can all get through this together. And so I want to thank the Institute of Coaching for making this possible, and for AceUp to joining us, and for all 3 of you. It's really been an amazing opportunity, and I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
A lot of fun. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the comments. They were fascinating to read.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.